Hey everybody, welcome to Bible class. We are going to be talking about, if you can guess, maybe, I bet you already know. We're going to be talking about Joseph, who wore a coat of many colors. And we'll be talking a little bit about kind of his early life and what happened to him. And so let's get into it. So, as we start talking about Joseph, I want to sort of review the family tree, the whole line, because this story really began with a man called Terah. I bet that's not who you thought I was going to say, is it? Who was Terah? Terah was the father of Haran, Nahor, and Abram. Abram and his nephew Lot, Abram's wife Sarai, set out from Ur of the Chaldeans with their whole family, went to Haran. They lived there, Terah died, and then they moved down to the Israel territory that we know the rest of the Israelites would end up living in. So that's where this started. And God told Abram, he made a promise, you're going to have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the seashore, the dust of the earth, right? And he promised, you're going to do this. But Abram, he was 75. He didn't have any kids. He thought, how's this going to work? So he had a son. What was his name? Sort of a trick question. He had a son named Ishmael first when he was 86, and then the son of promise. He laughs, Yitzhak, Isaac. And then when Isaac grew up, he married a woman called Rebekah, and they had twin boys. You remember them? Jacob, the smooth man, and Esau, who was red and he was hairy like a garment, like a goat skin, if you remember that. So that's kind of the family tree there. Now we get to Jacob, and Jacob, he meets God one night, and he wrestles with him as he's about to reunite with his brother Esau, and God essentially broke his hip. And at that point, he renamed him from Jacob to Israel, which means wrestles with God. And so now we have Israel, and he has 12 sons. He has Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Naphtali, Benjamin, Joseph, and one other one. I can't remember. Maybe you can remember. Now, whenever we get to talking about the 12 sons, specifically dealing with one in particular, takes us to Genesis chapter 37, where we start reading about Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob's favorite wife. So, he was a favorite son. That's probably not a good idea. Parenting advice 101, don't have favorite children. So when we get to him, we know that he was Jacob's favorite because the Bible tells us so. It's very clear, and because he was his favorite, his brothers weren't real happy about it. And he gave him a special coat, like this. I say like this. We don't really know if it was like this. There's a few different descriptors that talk about this coat. Some of them say that it was a coat with long sleeves. Some say it was an ornate robe. Some of them say it was a coat with many colors. It isn't real clear, but what we do know about it and what's important is that it was special. And so, because of the favoritism, because of the special coat, and all these kinds of things, his brothers were jealous. And jealousy causes all kinds of problems. So, were Joseph's brothers nice to him? No, they were not nice at all. In fact, they beat him to a pulp, and then they threw him into a pit. We call it a cistern. A cistern is actually a well. It would hold water when it rains, so that water would be collected, so whenever there was no rain, you had a place to go draw water. But in this one, there wasn't any water in it at the time. So they threw him into this deep hole in the ground, and they waited until Ishmaelite traders came by, and they sold him to the Ishmaelite traders. And then what did they do? They pretended that he was dead. They took this coat, they tore it all to bits, and they put goat's blood on it, and they took it to their father. And he said, "Oh no, this is my son's coat." He was grieving. Do you think that Joseph deserved this? Probably not. Do you think that he was mad because of what his brothers did? I bet that he was mad. Do you think he had a right to be mad? I kind of think so. I mean, that kind of thing is bad. They beat him. They threw him in a pit. They sold him to slavery. That's bad. I would be mad. I think he had a right to be mad. But the question that is very important is, did he stay mad forever? No. No, he did not. Even though he had all these dreams that said his brothers are going to bow down to him, his mother and father would bow down to him. You should talk about that more on Sunday. But whenever even those things happened, his brothers were jealous, they were mean, all these things, he didn't stay mad at his brothers. And we know that Joseph, he would eventually become ruler over all the land of Egypt, and only second to Pharaoh. And this was, of course, after this severe famine began. And then his brothers would come down to Egypt. And ultimately, his whole family would come to Egypt. So after his brothers, Joseph and his brothers, I guess, were reunited in Egypt because this severe famine that caused everybody in the world around to be coming to Egypt to get grain. When they and his whole family came down to Egypt, their father Jacob, he was 147 years old. That's old. And eventually he died at 147 years old. So when all of that happened, all of Joseph's brothers, they were really concerned because they knew what they had done to Joseph. They knew they were guilty of beating him, selling him into slavery, and all those things. And so they were worried that now that their father was gone, Joseph was going to take revenge again. He had given him that special coat. They had torn it. They had sold him. All those things that they did. He's going to be mad at us. But what did he say? Was he going to take revenge on them? Or was he going to be merciful to them? Let's see what he does. This is in Genesis chapter 50, verse 19 and 20 and 21. Joseph said to them, because they were saying, "You're going to be mean to us now, aren't you, that Dad's gone?" He said, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and for your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Now, whenever I think about it, that reminds me of something that Jesus said. I want you to turn, this is in Luke chapter 17, verse 3 and 4. You could turn over there if you'd like. But in Luke chapter 17, verse 3 and 4, there's a question about forgiveness. How much should I forgive? Jesus says, "Pay attention to yourselves. If your brother sins, rebuke him. And if he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times in the day and turns to you 7 times saying, 'I repent,' you must forgive him." And I think that's just what Joseph did. We're supposed to forgive those that sin against us. In Colossians 3, verse 13, it says that we should bear with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, you should forgive one another. And then Ephesians 4, it's verse 31 and 32, it says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. He says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ in God forgave you. Now, this is not an easy thing to do. Nevertheless, God expects us to forgive, just as we see Joseph doing. So I want you to think about something here. And this may be your brother, your sister, your friend, your parents, cousin, somebody that you may have done something to that maybe was wrong, that you maybe sinned against them. Think about that. When was a time that you did something wrong to somebody else? We have always done something wrong. Would you want that person to forgive you or to hold a grudge? Now let me ask you this question. When is a time that somebody else did something wrong to you? Maybe they sinned against you. You would want them to forgive you if you did something wrong to them, right? But is it always easy to forgive when somebody does something wrong and hurts us? I don't think it's very easy. It can be very difficult. But I believe that God, through His love and His example of forgiveness of Jesus coming and giving His life for us on the cross, that He can help us to be able to overcome our hurt feelings and our bitterness and our anger, our being mad. He can help us to overcome those things and be able to forgive. And He sets that example of forgiveness for us because He forgives me and He forgives you. So we also ought to forgive one another. So I hope you've enjoyed talking about this coat and what it kind of meant for Joseph, how he was the special favorite one, and then his forgiveness, even when his brothers wronged him so badly. Hope that we'll see you on Sunday, but until then, have a good week. Take care.